All right, Mets fans, welcome back to Straight Outta Flushing, where this week, since it is holiday season now, we are past the Thanksgiving holiday, we're going to bring you our holiday shopping episode. Yes, I know a lot of you are going to be holiday shopping. We're going to do that too here, but it's obviously going to be tailored around the New York Mets. I got my guy, Anthony Rivera, from the Subway To Shea Podcast joining me, and today we are going to do what David Stearns is probably doing right now. That is filling up the offseason shopping cart. We've got everything in this cart. Anthony, we got re-signing Pete and Edwin Díaz, trading for an ace, to adding a big bat, to fixing the outfield, and even, some of you guys like to call them small market Stearns, we have some bargain bin deals for you too. But here's the catch for me and Anthony. Every item is in the shopping cart. Either it's got to stay or it's got to get removed, right? So no wishful thinking, no overspending, just real Mets decisions. So we're going to build a cart that can actually get this team over the hump in 2026, because I know Anthony feels this way, and I do too. Mets, they got to be postseason bound in 2026 or else. Not sure what the or else is too, but we'll get to that too. Anthony, how you doing, sir? You ready to shop?
I'm doing great. It feels like as soon as you enter Black Friday, as soon as you get into the store, you just grab everything that you possibly can, and then you decide, do I really need to keep this or not? So, yeah, the Mets have a lot of work to do this offseason. David Stearns has a lot of work, so let's help him out here a little bit.
Oh, well, now I'm listening to this from you. You sound like a seasoned Black Friday shopper. Do you get down with the Black Friday shopping? Is that
Not anymore.
Okay.
Not anymore. When I was younger, yes. And I'm not going for the TVs at 5 a.m. and watching the stampedes happen. But you always see it on videos. Everyone's grabbing everything they possibly can, and then they decide if they're going to keep it or not, or, let it go to somebody else.
Yeah, so here we skipped all that. We just put everything in the cart, and there's going to be no fighting with anybody else. Anthony and I are going to have a civil discussion, and we will decide we do. But real quick, before we get to the shopping, something we have to address, and we want to address this quickly. There was a story that came out this Thanksgiving holiday weekend from my colleague Mike Puma, Mets beat reporter here at the New York Post, and he talked about some of the friction that may or may not be between shortstop Francisco Lindor, between Jeff McNeil, and also potentially rumors of friction between Lindor and Juan Soto. Anthony, I know you read the story. A lot of Mets fans did. There was a lot of reaction to this on social media. What was your immediate reaction to this, and do you have any cause for concern about what was reported?
No, I really don't have any concern, because if this team was winning, we probably wouldn't be talking about this right now. And especially the situation between Lindor and Juan Soto. These are just two different personalities, and there's a lot of personalities in the clubhouse. If you remember in 1986, you had the party crew with Keith Hernandez, Darryl Strawberry, Doc Gooden. I mean, the names go on, and then you had the clean-cut family man in Gary Carter, and they meshed well together and won a World Series. Now, this team hasn't done so, and they didn't make the playoffs last year, so here we are talking about this. Even the Lindor-McNeil situation, we've been there, we've done that already, and if it was that bad, then probably Jeff McNeil wouldn't be on the team. But they've been teammates for 5 years. So, probably a little squabble between the both of them. They probably talked it out and got through it. And here we are now.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with everything you just said. I can tell people that, in talking to some people around the Mets and talking to some things, the Lindor-Soto stuff is truly a non-story. It is a non-issue at all.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes I talk about this in other factors of sports. I've done it on this platform. I've done it in other places. Sports is still work. It's still labor. And sometimes you go to work with coworkers where you guys have different personalities, but you still get the job done, right? Everybody that works on a team at a job does not have to get along, doesn't have to be all kumbaya. You do not have to all go out for drinks. But if you can work towards a common goal, that is all that matters. And I think that's, like you said, that's just the difference between Lindor and Soto, just different personalities. But what I will say, I think a lot of people around the Mets will say they're both guys focused on winning, very focused on winning. They approach it differently, but they come to the ballpark every day trying to lead. As far as McNeil and Lindor, there's also some times when you work with people you don't like. And that's okay, too. That can happen okay. That can be okay, too. Now, you don't want physical confrontations and things of that nature. However, do I think it's anything to worry about? No, because like you said, they've been teammates for 5 years. If it was a bigger deal, one of them would have been gone, and I think we all know that would not be Francisco Lindor. And also, not sure how much longer Jeff McNeil is actually going to be a New York Met. So there's that. Wanted to get that out of the way. Let's get to the Black Friday shopping without talking about any squabbles or anybody giving anyone a black eye. Okay, first thing that we got in the cart, Anthony, re-signing Pete Alonso. Re-signing Pete Alonso is in the cart. And remember, we are here to decide whether we want to keep this in the cart, whether we want to take this out of the cart. Where are you on the re-signing of Pete Alonso? Is this something you have to buy?
Absolutely. Most definitely now that Brandon Nimmo's gone as well. And those two in Alonso and Nimmo provided some of the most offense that this team has gotten, especially with runners in scoring position. And to be at a point now where you have to figure out how to replace both of them is not a job that I would want to do. So I am all for re-signing Pete Alonso. Everyone talks about having that long-term Met, that lifelong Met. Here you go. Here's the guy. It's Pete Alonso. What a season he had last year. 272 batting average, 38 homers, 126 RBIs. Probably his second best or maybe tied for his top season in 2022. This is after, having that, not terrible, but not great season heading into free agency in 2024. But he had a great playoffs, and he continued that on with this season in 2025. This is a guy that the Mets should prioritize offensively and really should bring back. So I'm leaving Pete Alonso in the cart.
Yeah, okay. This is one where we absolutely agree on. I think you got to bring him back because of simply this. Like, look, somebody you may say to me, hey, Dex, well, what kind of contract are you giving him? And we're not going to get into all that. We're just talking about re-signing him, right? I think ideally 5 years, $150 million. However, it ain't my money. And if Steve Cohen's going to pay a little bit more, give him an extra year, so be it. Is that contract probably going to be beautiful for the Mets or the Mets fan at the end of it? Maybe not. But if you win a championship in that time, nobody's going to care, right? And what I think you have to add, you just brought up all the production that he's had, Anthony. Well, here's the big question for me. If you don't re-sign him, is he replaceable? How do you replace that production? You have no way to replace that internally. You'd have to go find that externally. And then who's that person, right, on the market that you could definitively say you're going to sign and replace him? You know what you have with him. The Mets have had their struggles offensively. He's a guy you could basically pencil in for 40 home runs. He is the franchise's all-time leader in home runs. You just mentioned the fact that there are Mets fans. I'm not saying everything has to be sentimental, but there are Mets fans who would like to see a homegrown Met play his entire career in Flushing and have his number retired. Well, you're right. Here's your guy to do it. The Mets need him. He had a good year. He's got more of the leverage than he did last offseason. I think you got to do it. And I think it's one of the most important moves that the Mets have to make this offseason. So I'm with you. We're going to keep him in the shopping cart. Now, I'm not taking re-signing Pete Alonso out of the shopping cart. Now, moving on to the second thing in the shopping cart. I could make the argument, Anthony, that this is maybe the most important move the Mets have to make this offseason, and that is re-signing Edwin Díaz. So when you look at his recent performance, when you look at what Díaz has done, and you can argue he's the best closer in the game, are you keeping him in the shopping cart and re-signing him, or are you moving on and rebuilding the bullpen without him?
Now, you're getting no argument from me here on Edwin Díaz. He is the number one priority. We talked about this. We were going to do the Thanksgiving episode, and then the whole Brandon Nimmo breaking news happened, so we switched gears. Edwin Díaz is the number one priority for this team. If he is not closing this season for the Mets, I would have a legitimate concern because there's a huge drop-off with free agents when it comes to relievers, and I know that relievers are fickle. I know that they're up and down every year a lot of times, but Edwin Díaz has proved year in, year out, ever since that struggle in 2019 when he first came over here, he has improved every year and has been one of the best Mets that you can ask for, and he can pitch here in New York. I mean, look at when the Yankees got Devin Williams and the struggles for him. Edwin Díaz has proven that he could pitch here in New York. The fans love him. You know, you got the Narcos playing. Edwin Díaz is the number one priority to me this offseason, because if you don't have him, man, you're really going to struggle to find someone to close out for this team.
So I love what you just said there. And I think it's the most important thing you said is he can pitch in New York. Anthony, you are a lifelong Mets fan. You have seen closers come to New York that cannot pitch in New York. Remember Armando Benitez, right?
Yeah.
You remember Armando Benitez? Edwin Díaz is so far from Armando Benitez that it should make Mets fans happy. And look, this is another situation where someone could tell me, hey, Dex, or Ant, the contract might not be great at the end. He just had a big contract. He opted out. He wants a similar contract. He wants a lot of money again. But to me, you got to do it because, again, this is a lot like Pete. What's your better option at closer, right? Where's your other proven talent at closer that, to Anthony's point, can pitch in this market? And we know it's not easy to pitch in this market. Just ask Ryan Helsley, right? We've seen this. So you know he can do it. You know he's also been pretty solid post-injury. First coming back from injury took him a little bit of time, but last year had a fantastic season. So this is a guy who's done it. He's been relatively durable. I think you've got to do it. You got to give him the big bucks. He's the best closer in the game. In my eyes, he can pitch in the big situation. Re-sign him. These first two, they got to stay in the cart. I mean, if you're taking him out the cart, it's a rough cart. Like, we're not even acting like we're looking through the store for these. These are in the cart. You got to get it to the checkout. Pete Alonso, Edwin Díaz, got to get him to the checkout. I'm with you, man.
Yeah. Yeah, people wanting the big free agent splash and all these big moves to happen, two of the most important moves revolve around players that you already have. So the Mets need to get this done. There's no excuse for them not to. And it's even now more important, the fact that the bullpen is, I don't want to say in shambles, but is not in great shape at this moment in time. And the fact that Brandon Nimmo has been traded away. So this offense needs a pick-me-up.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that too. Okay, here's where the cart gets a little bit more fun, people. It gets a little bit more interesting. And I'm intrigued to see where myself and Anthony go here. A lot of you have been asking for this. This is on your Christmas wish list, your holiday shopping list, whatever you want to call it. Anthony and I have talked about this a little bit before too. We have said the Mets need to get better with their pitching. Number one, we've also talked about their defense. But let's start with the pitching. A lot of fans would like to see this team trade for an ace. It could be Tariq Skubal. It could be Joe Ryan. It could be Sandy Alcantara. Whatever you want. We're just talking about trading for an ace. They will trade for you. You're going to take trading for ace. It could be one of those three guys, maybe somebody else. Maybe you consider Framber Valdez an ace. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Whatever you think the ace is, this is in the cart. Are you checking this out? Are you taking trading for an ace?
I am checking out with trading for an ace.
I feel like
as long as the 1-year warranty doesn't expire, because these guys are going to be free. Definitely Tariq Skubal is going to be a free agent at the end of the season. Freddie Peralta is going to be a free agent. So the fact that the Mets need to maybe sign and trade sign and trade, do one of those for Skubal, who's probably going to be a free agent, especially working with Scott Boras. So I'd probably wait for him. But there, like you mentioned, there's Sandy Alcantara, there's Edward Cabrera, Yuri Perez from the Marlins, Joe Ryan, Pablo Lopez. If I'm trading for one of these starting pitchers, it may be one from Minnesota, because there's more years left on their deals, and with the fact that is possible, I think the Mets need to consider something like that. But there is a caveat that you will have to trade more than you're willing to get one of these guys.
I've thought about this one long and hard. I think where the Mets are and where you and I both, Anthony, think they need to be in 2026, which is being a true World Series contender, which is being back in the playoffs. No missing the playoffs. The Mets miss the playoffs, it's a failure. I think the Mets have some talent in their pitching rotation. I think they also have some question marks. I think they absolutely need an ace. Now, how they get that ace, to me, is the biggest thing. And also, I think what people consider an ace. I talked with John Heyman about this last week. He said the only person he would consider an ace is Tariq Skubal. I understand where he's coming from on that. He is the elite of the elite. It is going to take a lot to get him. And he's going to have, as you said, Anthony, the 1-year warranty. Tariq Skubal is not doing a sign and trade with the Mets. Scott Boras, that's not the game Scott Boras plays, right? He wants to see his clients get to free agency. Now, Scott Boras always got his clients paid the way they probably should be in free agency as of late? No. But, to me, if you're the Mets, this has to be, you got to check out here. Because this has to be in the plan. Whoever it is, whether it's Skubal, whether it's Sandy Alcantara, whether it's Joe Ryan, whoever it is that you think can lead this rotation, you got to go get him. Now, I do think it's preferable if you go get a Joe Ryan, like you said, who has more years. I think it's a little easier to get that into the checkout line to check this out as one of your gifts this holiday season. But I think you have to get it done. I think this is high on your list. You've got to check this off. You have to show that you're serious about improving this rotation. Sure, somebody out there is going to be like, Dex, Nolan McLean showed us what he could do. He's on the way. You can't put that kind of pressure on this young man. He's got to have somebody that can lead this team so he can grow into being the ace. He doesn't need that pressure on him right now. So I say trade for an ace because it shows that you're aggressive. It shows you're willing to do what it takes to win. It shows that you're willing to do what it takes to get this team to where they want to be in 2026. And I also will say this. If it is Tariq Skubal and you have a good chance to get him, you got to do it. Prospects be damned. You have to go out and get him. But I was going to say by any means necessary. We're not going to go that far. But yes, you have to go out and get him. And I think the Mets have to do it. Figure it out later. Again, I say this all by saying this is not my money. Steve Cohen's money. You got the money to sign a Tariq Skubal. Now, do you want to invest that much in a pitcher? I say, yeah. You already did it with Soto on the offense. You got to go get a big name on the pitching side too. So I'm saying you got to check out here. You got to do it. Now, I say all that to say, Anthony, you might want to go to the next thing that we have in our basket, shopping cart, whatever you want to call it. You don't have to trade for an ace. You could also sign an ace. So that could be Framber Valdez, free agent. Tatsuya Ime from Japan. Do they look at him as an ace? Is that somebody you want to sign? Are you checking out here? We both agree with trading for an ace, but sign an ace. Are you checking out here or are you taking this out the cart?
Yeah, this is the first time I'm taking that out of the cart and putting it back on the shelf because I don't consider Tatsuya Ime a ace like a Yamamoto is, or even to the extent that a Hiroki Sasaki could be. Framber Valdez, he's on the peripheral of that, but here's why I'm putting this back on the shelf. And there's one name, Dylan Cease. 8-12, 4.55 ERA, just got a 7-year, $210 million deal with the Toronto Blue Jays. And I feel like that changes everything when it comes to starting pitching. And that's something that we've known in the past that David Stearns doesn't mess with. He'd have to be with the talent that Yamamoto has, where they were willing to give, 12 years, 350 mil, something like that in those terms. They haven't done that since. They haven't, offered any contract out like that. So I don't see them doing that. That's why I'm sticking with keeping the trade for an ace in the cart, but I'm putting back sign an ace back on that shelf.
Yeah, we're in agreement. We're 4 for 4 in agreement on here too. Put this back on the shelf for me. Tatsuya Ime, do not view him as an ace. Very good pitcher, probably more in the middle of a rotation. Kodai Senga mold, we'll get to him later. Framber Valdez, my concern here is I agree. I think he's at number 2, more likely. But the other thing with him is, can he stay healthy? He has injury concerns. That's a big concern for me. And do you want to go invest in somebody that sometimes might not be available? So for me, I think the Mets' better option to get an ace is to trade for one. Yes, is that going to cost you prospects? Absolutely. But you got to give up something to get something. I think it's the best way for the Mets to go. So yeah, sign an ace leaving that on the shelf. All right, let's look at the outfield upgrade. This kind of goes off where we were talking about last week here, Anthony, once we saw the Brandon Nimmo news with him being traded. The big question here is, okay, who's the Nimmo replacement? The Mets now need 2 outfielders, right? And we'll get to a possibility in another position. Who would you like to see? Would you go for an outfield replacement, whether it's via trade, whether it's via free agent signing, to find somebody to play in left, to find somebody to play in center? Who would that be for you? Is this off the shelf or in the cart as a must-have, because there's 2 spots that the Mets don't have anybody playing there right now?
So, yeah, I am keeping the outfield upgrade in the cart. I just am torn with who that is possibly going to be, because the names that are out there, they all have great attributes about them, but they also have things that, don't sound great. Obviously, a Cody Bellinger, who is probably the best defensive outfielder in free agency, and he could play first base. So if Pete Alonso does not return, you've got, a guy that could play center field and first base. But he struggled outside of Yankee Stadium last season, and that's a concern for me, considering that Citi Field is a pitcher's ballpark. And you got Kyle Tucker, who is probably going to get a ton of money. So I would assume that possibly they would not offer another huge contract out there, especially if they want to bring back Pete, if they want to bring back Edwin Díaz. With so many moves that need to be made, I think Kyle Tucker is not going to be that guy. There's Jarren Duran that you could trade for from the Boston Red Sox, but there's, questions about his mental makeup, and I don't know how that fits in Queens. The guy that I would look into, though, and I know he's a little bit of an injury-prone type player, but if you can tag him along with a Joe Ryan and a Pablo Lopez out of Minnesota, maybe Byron Buxton, if he can get rid of his no trade clause, maybe he's the guy that could play center field. Maybe Citi Field helps him out and he starts being a little bit more healthier than usual, because he's a great center fielder, and you tag along a pitcher that we've been talking about trying to trade for. Maybe that's the way to go.
Hadn't thought about the pairing of him in a trade with Joe Ryan. I like Buxton. Got a lot of concerns about him staying healthy. That's the one thing that makes me nervous. You mentioned Bellinger as well, too, who I think would be a really good fit. I just think the concern is, what's the deal? How long for him? Look, this has to go in the cart because the Mets have 2 positions
they need.
They at least, and we'll get to this later, but maybe one comes internally, and we could talk about that. But what I can say is you can't be running it. I don't want to hear about Jeff McNeil as an option. No, you can't do that.
No.
Tyrone Taylor. These are not everyday starting center fielders or left fielders, just to be clear. This isn't that. So to me, this has to go in the cart. Do you love the options that are out there in the free agent market? Yeah, there's some good ones, but there's not a lot. It's not abundantly rich in the outfield depth in the free agent market. So it's got to go in the cart. The Mets are going to have to do something. I don't think they can be cheap on this. This is something I also would like to say. I think they have to invest in one position player out there that's at least a proven everyday player. And we'll see. But yeah, that's in the cart for me. The Mets have to improve their outfield depth. There's 2 spots open right now with the trade in MO, and they got to go get that done. So we'll see. Okay. We talked about either trading for an ace or signing an ace. But what about starting pitching depth? Right? The Mets, you could argue they have some right now, but here's the thing we always hear, Anthony. You can never have enough pitching. Do they need another, SP4, SP5, for insurance? Because I think you could pencil in, we'll get to this guy too, Senga, if he stays, right? How does Sean Manaea return? David Peterson, does he bounce back after his second half last year? And, Nolan McLean will be expected to be in the rotation, but then you're thinking about, okay, what do the Mets have past that? So when you look at starting pitching depth and maybe some names the Mets can, Mike King is a name who's done well as a starter out with the Padres. What do you think? Starting pitching depth, is this something you're keeping in the cart? or you're getting rid of? Is this essential?
This is probably the toughest one right now. That definitely the toughest one that we've done because the Mets could use, pitching depth. Michael King would be great. But then you got to, check the price in the cart and see if it's somewhat on sale because now that this Dylan Cease deal is done, all these prices of these starting pitchers, no matter how good they are going to go up. There's a lot of depth out there that you can look at. Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, like you mentioned, Michael King is out there, Nick Martinez, Ranger Suarez. There's a lot of names that could be taken from. But, you look at what the Mets are doing, it all depends on, I guess, if they're going to trade any of these guys as well. Because you got David Peterson probably locked into the rotation. You got Clay Holmes locked into the rotation. Kodai Senga, if he doesn't get traded, and we just found out today he doesn't want to be traded. So if he's not traded, he'll probably get a crack at the rotation. Sean Manaea, as you mentioned, he's probably another guy that's in the rotation. Then you got the kids in Sproat, Tong, and McLean, who are also going to be vying for their spots. Probably not so much McLean. He's probably going to lead the charge there. But there's just so many pitchers that the Mets have right now, and the options are there, but you're asking for a lot of bounce back, right? From Sean Manaea, you're asking David Peterson to bounce back from his second half. You're asking Kodai Senga to bounce back from that injury. Clay Holmes was the most consistent starting pitcher, and to me, he's probably a 4 or a 5 that'll give you 5 innings consistently. So the Mets may need to look at someone that's going to give them length, someone that is good with defense and helps with the run prevention, as David Stearns has talked about. So I'm a little bit torn here. I think I have to, check the price at one of those price checker markers that's in the store to decide if I'm keeping and holding on to this depth.
So much of this matters with what we've already kept in the cart, right? Like if you keep in the cart, you check out the fact you're going to get an ace, and we talked about trading for an ace. If you're going to do that, then you're going to lose some of the depth you have in terms of young pitchers. Let's say the Mets get, I'll say Tariq Skubal or Sandy Alcantara, right? You're probably giving up a Jonah Tong and or Brandon Sproat, at least maybe combine that with a Jet Williams or, another prospect. So you're going to give up some of the pitching depth there for sure. This is going to be, I'm not keeping this in the card. This is not checking out. I'm leaving this because I'm banking on the fact that if you go and get an ace, now you're not relying as heavily on some of the guys you mentioned. Now, do you still need them? Absolutely. You need Clay Holmes to still be a 4th, 5th starter for you and give you 5 innings, and he was solid and pitched longer into the season, I think, much more than any of us anticipated, right? David Peterson has shown you over the last year and a half, take away, the second half of last year, that he can pitch really well, even pitch well in the playoffs in 2024. So there are things you can be encouraged about with there. You need Manaea to bounce back. You need Senga to bounce back. Now, here's the thing. I know people are going to hear that and say, that's a lot of ifs. I feel you. You're not wrong about that. But you know what masks a lot of ifs in a rotation? An ace. And that would help. And everybody being able to move down a peg and not maybe feel the pressure to produce up one slot higher than they're able to produce. So I think if you get an ace in here, that the rotation starts looking a little bit deeper than maybe it was before. And I think that, I won't say it's a cure-all, but I think that it really helps the problem that the Mets have, and their rotation starts looking a little bit deeper than it once was. So for me, it's a tough one. I'm with you, Anthony, but I'm putting this one back up on the shelf and maybe going to another store and seeing if, I can get a little bit of a discount someplace else. Somebody wants to come snatch it out of my shopping cart? Fine. You can take it.
Yeah.
Not gonna.
Yeah, the depth is really contingent on what the Mets do at the top of the rotation. Like you said, they get an ace, then this is probably a non-story. But if they don't, then you're obviously going to throw more names, more names at trying to get into this rotation and signing some guys on the cheap. And there are a lot of guys out there, but the Mets' focus should be on getting that ace, as we talked about earlier.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. with that. Okay, here's one that I find interesting. And we talked about Edwin Díaz, and we both believe he's a priority. We signed him, it's in the cart. We already believe that. But if you look at the rest of the Mets bullpen, cupboard's kind of bare there. They got some things they need to do in terms of rebuilding this bullpen. There's some interesting options out there in terms of a bullpen rebuild. So is bullpen rebuild something that you're going to put in the cart? Maybe you're going to buy in bulk, try to get yourself a couple of good arms here. In bullpen rebuild, are you leaving it or keeping it?
Buy in bulk. I like how you said that. Absolutely. Yes, we need, not only do we need Edwin Díaz to come back, but we need a true setup man. What we asked Ryan Helsley to do and he couldn't do. We need someone not only to set up Edwin Díaz, but to kind of relieve him when he needs a night off, and we need someone else to close. Right now, the bullpen is AJ Minter, Brooks Raley, Oscar Brazaban as well. And, bring back Edwin Díaz if you can. Definitely want to give another shot at Tyler Rogers. He's probably the only guy that the Mets traded for that I want to see, because I like that he has a different delivery with that submarine delivery. I think you mentioned it, Emilio Pagan. That could be a guy that you throw out there. You got Robert Suarez, Pete Fairbanks from the Tampa Bay Rays. There's just so much. Kyle Finnegan is out there. And you know what? If the Mets want to look at Luke Weaver to be somewhat in the bullpen, that's another name you can look at. I know that's bringing someone else from the Yankees, but he had the talent. He was a closer for a while, just like Clay Holmes, and it didn't work out there. But you know that he has the talent to pitch in New York, and he's proven that. Maybe it didn't work out last season, but this guy was closing games in the postseason in 2024.
Yeah, Emilio Pagan is a name, and you mentioned this there too. I wouldn't mind either. Bullpens are tough for me, Anthony. You got to buy in bulk. This is staying in the cart for me because the Mets, it's almost like the outfield. They have to do this,
yeah.
Right? Like this is almost a non-negotiable here. They've got to get this done. Arms are tough in the bullpen because it's so volatile. We can see guys have great years, 1 year, and then not have another year where they're not good. Luke Weaver's an interesting option, right? And I love that you mentioned him. He's pitched here in New York. Now I understand it did not end well, but he did pitch in New York, and I do think that matters for something. I wouldn't be mad at that at all whatsoever. But the Mets have to add arms. Now, I think what kind of arms? I love that you said that. Tyler Rogers is somebody I would also be intrigued in bringing back. Tyler Rogers is in his mid-30s, but I love his delivery. He's got the funky delivery. That throws people off. It's hard for batters to pick that up, the ball coming out of his hands. I think he's good. Anthony, I want to ask you this too. Another guy, we know Ryan Helsley is now gone to Baltimore, and I don't think any Mets fans wanted to see him back again, so we knew that was going to happen. What about Gregory Soto? Where are you on him? Would you want him as part of this, buy in bulk? Would you bring him back or not?
I think I'm passing on Gregory Soto, although if they do sign him, I'd be okay with it. But the fact that we have Minter and Brooks Raley, you got two lefties already in the bullpen, and we don't know where Sean Manaea is going to fit in, if it's in the rotation. We know he could come out of the bullpen. He's done it in the past. That's how he turned around his career in San Francisco. So Gregory Soto is not a guy that I would try to bring back, but if they did, I wouldn't really be upset about it.
Okay. All right, fair. Look, I think there's some options. I think for me it's what kind of arms do they get out of the pen? What age range are they looking in? Right? Mm-hmm. And listen, the guys who are in their late 20s to early 30s are the ones that are going to get a little more years, also a little bit more money. But I think they do need to get some arms within their prime is what I'll say. Tyler Rogers, I said mid-30s. I'm not out here calling you old Tyler Rogers, but you are trending that way. Although we like the innings that you can give, I do think they want to try to get a little bit younger in the bullpen. I have liked the way the Mets have approached the bullpen the last couple of years, in which they will rotate arms, whether it's up and down from the farm system. But I think it's a place you need to have depth. But here's what it all comes down to as well, too. But this is why this has to be in the cart, Anthony. You and I have talked about this. I don't know how many shows we talked about this when you came on with me throughout the season. Or last 2 seasons, or 3 seasons, I could even say. If the starters aren't going to give you length, then you're going to need these arms in the pen. Because we saw at points and times in the last couple of seasons where the pen gets taxed. and that is a problem. And not only do the Mets need arms, they need versatile arms. Some arms that can give you 2 innings in a pinch when needed, right? Oscar Brazaban has been somebody like that who's shown that, and I'm intrigued to see. He went down, up and down a couple of times. How can he bounce back? But to me, you got to buy in bulk. You got to hopefully you hit on the right arms. You got to get some youth in there and have a good mix. And guys that can pitch in New York. So for me, in terms of rebuilding the bullpen, that's a must. You got to keep it in the card. You cannot put that back on the shelf at all whatsoever. Now, let's get to possibly trading somebody. This is in the card. Trading Jeff McNeil. We know now with the trade of Brandon Nimmo, right, and Marcus Semien coming in, things not looking so good for Jeff McNeil being on this roster. However, some people might argue and say, well, Jeff McNeil's valuable. He can play second. He can play in the outfield for you if you need to. So where are you? Do you sell now with Jeff McNeil? Keep this in the cart, sell him now? Or do you keep the Swiss Army knife? What do you do with Jeff McNeil? I'm trading him and keeping that trade in the cart, or are you doing something else?
Sell. Yeah, it's time. It's time. He's got 1 year left on the deal, a deal that he was basically signed for because of what he did in 2022, but he hasn't been that person. He hasn't been the same person that they signed him for. So I get the versatility, but you got a crop of younger players here that could probably be more versatile now. Brett Beatty, who could play second and third, and you could probably throw him in the outfield if you need to. Luis Angel Acuna, another guy. Ronnie Mauricio, you're probably going to want to try out in multiple positions. So they have the options to be doing this. And I just think that it's time to move on from Jeff McNeil if you're going to do that. There's always this talk about, let's break up the core of this, let's break up the core of that. Well, one of the guys has gone in Brandon Nimmo. I think the other guy that has to be traded is Jeff McNeil. And the time has come for Jeff McNeil to move on with his career.
Yeah, keep this in the card. It's time. You said this to me at the end of the season when we talked. Jeff McNeil, just in a production standpoint, not how you feel about Jeff McNeil, as a player that's come up through the system. He has not produced since 2022. Anthony is 100% right about that. Take aside what we talked about at the top of this episode and the stuff with Francisco Lindor. We're just talking about production, just straight production. He has not produced. Also, even though he can allow you some versatility, and I thought he did not play a particularly bad center field last year when he was there, he's also not a plus defender out there. So for me, keep this in the cart. Trade Jeff McNeil. Check this out. Trade him. I understand you are selling low on Jeff McNeil. I understand that you're probably not going to get a lot in return for Jeff McNeil. I understand that even in the deal, you're probably going to have to eat some money in his contract. I get all that. But it's time. Sometimes you got to know when to move. You got to know when to sell. And this is one you got to know to keep in the cart. Jeff McNeil, we thank you for your time. We thank you for your service. But it's time to move on. I'm with you on this, Ant. It's just time. Now, that might have been a little bit down. So let's try to add some more energy here for the people. I'm surprised it took us this long to get to this because in the cart, everybody's going to say, okay, Dex and Anthony, when are you guys going to add a bat? When are you going to add a big bat to this lineup? Because some of you guys out there will say you can always have some more offense. And I guess the question here, Anthony, is this lineup missing, I don't want to say missing star power because they've got stars here, but do they need another bat? And you mentioned a name earlier in Byron Buxton, who fills a need in center field. We also know he can give you a little bit in terms of the power and hitting as well too. But then on this market, you've got Kyle Schwarber, right, who we know could absolutely bring the power. We've seen it. Unfortunately, Mets have been on the receiving end of that from his time with the Phillies. And then, you've got Alex Bregman, who can also maybe fill a need if you're not going to go with Beatty at third. But does that also block him? But he's somebody who can provide power, although he's a lot older. So I would have some concerns there. Any of these names, any other names, do the Mets need a big bat? Is this something you got to keep in the card or something you put back on the shelf?
No, we're keeping this in the card, and I'm not even talking about a trade for Byron Buxton. I want Kyle Schwarber on this team. I want to take him from the Phillies. I've wanted him ever since he was in Boston. I want that offensive production. Could you imagine him in the lineup with Lindor, with Juan Soto, with Pete Alonso. And I'm saying, yes, both of those guys I want, because maybe you can get Kyle Schwarber on a shorter term deal. He'll be the DH, and by the time his contract is over, maybe it'll be time for Pete Alonso to move from first base and finally be DH. Alex Bregman would be nice to get, but I think I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt, and I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to Brett Baty of how well he played in the second half of the season, offensively, defensively. If that's one less player and money you need to spend to focus on other things, I think I'm going to keep Brett Baty at third. So give me Kyle Schwarber. That's the guy I want. That's the power I want. Have a little bit of a type of Bash Brothers with him and Pete Alonso. That would be a way to me to replace Brandon Nimmo's offensive production.
Oh, I was thinking about putting this on the shelf. And now you got me thinking about it. Do I want to put this on the shelf? Do the Mets need, there's bats they need at parts in the lineup. And you actually bring up a really good, what really made me consider it was your plan with Schwarber and putting him at DH. Because it's fair to question, do the Mets have an answer at DH in their lineup? And if you don't fill the DH spot with somebody who's serviceable, that you can trust, you're potentially talking about Mark Vientos there again. And some Mets fans out there watching this discussion may feel differently about Mark Vientos. I'm leaning to Vientos as a player that it might be time for the Mets to move on from. Might be. At least definitely for any positions of playing in the field. That's for sure. DH is probably his position, but can you do better than that? Schwarber is absolutely better than that. We know that for sure. It would boost the lineup. It would not, I think, put as much pressure offensively on someone like a Marcus Semien, who will be coming to this lineup that should be much further down in the order, that is not the hitter that he once was, but is still a fantastic defensive player. You might have convinced me, Ant. You might have convinced me here. I think I'm going to go with keeping the big bad addition in the cart. With that being said, it would have to be Schwarber, because I don't know if there's another name out there that I'm inclined to be like, okay, here, that's a guy you're going to sign that you could plug right in and fits perfectly, right? Like I just don't see it. Bregman, I'm kind of with you. The age is a concern for me. And I'm with you. I've seen enough from Baty where I'm actually okay with him at third. I thought he played good defense. I thought he hit well. It was unfortunately got hurt at the end of the season, as you mentioned. But if it's Schwarber, I'm here. I'm here for it. If you get him on a shorter deal and you get him and Pete, look, in terms of offense, and then we'll see whatever happens in the outfield. See, Anthony, and let's bring Anthony back up on the screen. Anthony, you swayed me. But see, now I'm going to blame you. I'm not really blaming you, but Mets fans are now going to be dreaming when they hear this from you. They're like, I could see it. I could see Pete. I could see Schwarber in the lineup. I could see good things for the Mets offense. I like the dream. I like the vision. I'm with you. I'm gonna keep. I like it.
Listen, this team struggled with runners in scoring position. We saw it all season long. Outside of that big August that they had, they struggled with runners in scoring position. Who was the best player for that? It was Brandon Nimmo, and he's gone now. This team, as much as I love the run prevention and the defensive philosophy, you still have to score runs to win. And if you have Pete Alonso, who's already proven here in Queens, we know Kyle Schwarber could probably hack it here in Queens as well, especially to right field. We've seen him hit monster home runs. I think that having those two in the lineup, I think it's a huge positive to me. That's the only big offensive bat that I really care about right now is Kyle Schwarber. Outside of Pete,
we might have to just change what we're keeping in the card to sign Kyle Schwarber. That might be it. That might be it. But listen, if they could add another bat, and you know what? And I also will. As I'm thinking through of this, which is the fun of this exercise. You know, one of the things I think you talked about a lot in your podcast last year, I talked a lot about on the show, is particularly in the beginning of the season for the Mets, was how top-heavy the lineup was, right? You know, you had the Fantastic Four. They were producing. You felt like you didn't know what they were going to get beyond that, and that was a huge part of the problem. I'm going to say the same thing that I just said with the pitching rotation. if you can just make things a little bit deeper in the lineup, right, where one guy is maybe not hitting higher up in the order, now it takes some pressure off a guy like a Francisco Alvarez, right, who now maybe is sitting in the 6 hole and feels a bit better about how he's going to produce, or Brett Beatty, who could be hitting 7th or wherever he may be hitting. These are guys who now can relax a little bit, younger players who can relax a little bit. So, yeah, I'm here for it. Let's go get a bat. Let's keep that in the shopping cart. Okay. We have one player I want to talk about, keeping in the shopping cart. Bichette, name that had been talked about a lot with the Mets, free agent from the Blue Jays, can play in the middle of the infield, second or short. Well, here's the thing. We know he's not playing short, right? Because of Francisco Lindor, and now second baseman with Marcus Semien in here. So, Anthony, are we just putting this one back on the shelf and out the cart?
Yeah, it's one of those things where you grab everything that you want, and then you're like, I have to really be, conscious of my spending here, and what do I really need this? It's a want, but is it a need? And I don't think they need Bichette. Obviously, he would be an upgrade, but like we talked about, Marcus Semien is playing second. You got Francisco Lindor playing shortstop. Those guys ain't moving anywhere. Are you going to put him at third? I mean, I guess you could, but like that's not a need if Brett Beatty is playing the way he played in the second half of the season. And I think that with the confidence that he's gotten, it's time to give him the opportunity. Just like we did Mark Vientos. When Mark Vientos had that solid 2024, my thought was he's my third baseman going into the year because he's earned it. Well, now the time has changed. Now Brett Beatty is that guy. And Brett Beatty, to me, has earned third base. So I really don't see anywhere to put Bichette at this time. So I'm going to put him back on the shelf. And it was just more of a, yeah, that'd be cool to have him as well. But let's not.
Yeah, I don't have to be too deep on this. It's just not a place for him. So, we're just not going to be greedy and just buy everything. Anthony and I think we have a budget, right, Anthony? I think we do. I'm not. Again, it's not our money. So there we go. I think we have a budget. But no, Bichette, got to put him back on the shelf. Like him as a player, think there was a place he could have fit here, but not so more right now. So I'm going to put him back on the shelf. All right, let's move along here. In the shopping cart, we also have this. Trade Kodai Senga. Now, you mentioned this earlier in the program. Kodai Senga came out and informed the Mets that he would like to stay here in New York. I've seen this since last season. Look, and I understood it with some of the Mets fan base. Some of you guys out there wanted to get him out of town last year. You were done with the injuries. You were frustrated, all of that. Do you sell low with Kodai Senga? Or is he a guy that you look as a reset candidate, can bounce back this year? So what do you do? Are you keeping this in the cart to trade him, or are you putting this back on the shelf?
I think I definitely want to trade him. I know that it's a sell low right now. I know the contract is favorable for the Mets, and I don't know if they can figure out a way. I mean, they found a way to trade Nimmo's contract. So if they could figure out a way to trade and get something back for Kodai Senga, you got to try to do it. I know he's talented, super talented. And when he's playing at his best, he's been a good Met. He's got a good record, got a good ERA. But the problem is with Kodai Senga is he's very high maintenance, and everything has to be set in a certain direction, in a certain way. Everything has to be perfect for us to get the best out of Kodai Senga. And the Mets don't have a rotation that they can do that with. They don't have, 6 reliable starters. They barely have 2 or 3 reliable starters that can get us 5 or 6 innings. So to kind of put this rotation around Kodai Senga, again, and work things around if he could pitch every 6th day, or, he's not feeling good, so, he's got to go on the IL. And his maintenance is too much for me. And if they could figure out a trade partner and to get something back in return, I would highly consider it. And it seems like the Mets are highly considering it too, that they're ready to trade Kodai.
This is one of the tougher ones for me. Kodai Senga has been, like you said, when you look at him on the field, when he is on the field, and I understand that's a big part of it here, Anthony. He's been one of the better Mets signings in their history in terms of his production when on the field. The problem is he's not always on the field. Anthony, let me throw a question back at you with this, because it ties into something we were talking about earlier. If the Mets were to acquire an ace here, does that change how you feel about keeping this in the shopping cart or not? Like, if they get an ace, would you be then more inclined to keep Kodai Senga rather than trade him?
I don't know. They have so many people that are vying for those final spots. If it came to keeping him, keeping Peterson, keeping Manaea, that's where the problem comes in, because not every one of these guys is going to be in the rotation, even if they get an ace, right? Because it'll probably be whoever the ace is. It'll be Nolan McLean, and then I'm pretty sure Clay Holmes is going to be in the rotation. That's 3. You got 2 more spots, maybe David Peterson, unless they trade him, and then you're thinking Kodai Senga, Sean Manaea, and figure it out from then. You got the kids too, in Sproat and Tong. So it's a really tough decision. But if I can find a taker for Kodai Senga and get something back in return, whether it's more relief pitching instead of having to sign a relief pitcher, maybe you go that way. This is just a really tough situation, especially with like we've talked about. It's kind of trickled down. We need to know who's going to be the ace of the staff, and if they make a trade for a starting pitcher, and then we can figure out how the rest of the rotation is going to pan out.
It's because of that, and that's why I asked you this question. I think that's why I'm leaning to keep putting this on the shelf. Part of me wants to give him another season, but I also understand the trepidation around that. If I'm banking in the fact that we're going to check out and get an ace, that drops him down a little bit, but then you go into this good spot where it really comes down to 2 pitchers for 1 spot with him and Sean Manaea. Now, you mentioned this before. Sean Manaea is a little bit more suited to pitch out of the bullpen. He's done this before. That's how he got his career back on track. Kodai Senga, probably not. But I'm going to put this on the shelf. This is probably the first one we disagree on. I'm going to put it on the shelf because I'm going to bank on the Mets getting an ace and maybe doing some other things that takes the pressure off of Senga, and he is now a 3 or 4 starter, even though I think he has the upside of 2 stuff. And they can try with him for 1 more season. The problem with that, though, is I understand I just said that you'd be selling low if you move him now. The problem is, Anthony, what if it goes wrong, right? What if it goes wrong and then he is in a situation where I'm knocking on the desk here, but let's say he's injured in May, not a season-ending injury, but something where he's out for 6 to 8 weeks, right? And you only end up getting 18 starts out of him for the year.
Mm-hmm.
Now what do you do? Next holiday season, you and I are in the same thing, and we're like, can you even trade Kodai Senga? Right? Like that, because the value is so low. Sometimes you got to know when to sell. It's tough. I've always liked this stuff. Maybe I'm being greedy here. Maybe I'm being foolish. Try to get 1 more season out of him. I'm going to put this on the shelf. We'll see. I'm probably going to be wrong. But again, it's not my money. It's not my money. All right, here's an interesting one with a young player that I'm so intrigued to hear what you have to say about this. We're going to get to the young pitchers in a second, people. Don't worry, we have not forgotten about them. But one of the young prospects that David Stearns talked about at the GM meetings and said it is possible this player could be on the Mets opening day roster, that is Carson Bench. And he could start in center field. So we put this here in the shopping cart, starting Carson Bench in center field. Then the big question here is the center field of the future, who the Mets think that he is he ready right now? Well, I'm going to say this, Anthony, before you answer. They need him to be. The way they have holes in center field, they absolutely need him to be. So what are you saying? Are you keeping starting Carson Bench in center field? Are you keeping that in the cart, or are you putting that on the shelf and going to get somebody else to start as a center fielder?
Up until today, I had put him back on the shelf because I thought maybe he needs a little more seasoning down in AAA. Maybe he's just not ready yet. We've rushed a lot of prospects already before. But then during my show in the chat, John Saponaro, who's been on your show from Till Mets Do His Part, reiterated to me, which you had just mentioned about, how much David Stearns has talked about this guy. And I thought to myself, you know what? I don't remember any GMs really pumping up any players as much as I feel like David Stearns has done with Carson Bench. So I'm going to keep Carson Bench in the cart. And if he can start in center field, that is kind of like Brett Beatty, where you don't have to worry about signing another free agent to play the outfield. Maybe they only need one outfielder then when it comes to free agency, or maybe they can rely their offense on, like we talked about earlier, bringing in a Kyle Schwarber and allowing Carson Bench to grow in the outfield. So I'm going to keep him in the cart, and that's in hoping and trusting that David Stearns has seen enough from Carson Bench that he has a terrific spring and he comes out the gate ready to be the starting center fielder when opening day comes.
Okay, shout out to John Saponaro, friend of the show, who we love from the Till Mets Do Us Part podcast. Stearns talking about him and when he did it, the winter meetings, was very eye-opening to me. Very, very eye-opening. That raised my eyebrows, and I was like, this is interesting. Now, here's the thing, and I don't have to tell you, Anthony, because you've been living your whole life watching this. Mets fans have seen time and time again highly touted prospects, particularly position players, not generally pitchers, position players, talked up basically among the fan base only to be let down. We can talk about Alex Ochoa. We can talk about Jay Payton. There's a list. We can go all the way down the list, up and down the list, right, of guys that haven't done it. But I'm not quite sure. I think Anthony makes a good point. I'm not quite sure, and so does John, that we've seen a GM or president of baseball operations talk about someone like this. And in fact, they think that he could be ready for opening day. I say go for it. One of the things that's good in baseball is if you can hit on young, relatively cheap talent. If you hit on that, that is huge for your development. And then if you can sign them and extend that, that is huge. I say do it, but this is with a caveat. I'm not putting him back on the shelf. I'm keeping this in the cart. But this is all contingent upon the fact you got to go get somebody else to help him in the outfield, particularly in the corner. You got to get a corner outfielder, left fielder that is going to be strong there, so he has good support to play good center field between Soto and whoever will play in left. That is imperative to me, absolutely imperative to me. But I'm here for this. If you think this guy is who you believe he is, then go for it. Bring him up. And one of the things I have liked about what Stearns and company have done in the front office is, all right, let's bring up some of these kids. Let's see what they've got. I loved what they did with the pitching last year. So if I love that, why not do this here with Carson Bench? Now, Carson Bench has absolutely got to go and earn this. He's actually got to earn it in spring training, but that's the risk here. If you have him try to earn it and then he doesn't earn it, what do? What's your backup plan, right? Because I know a lot of you guys are not trying to see Tyrone Taylor and others out there in center field next year with a limited bat. What's your backup plan? Or are you going to be willing to let him work through some of those problems at the major league level? I think it's an interesting thing to look at, interesting thing to see. I'm inclined to keep this in the shopping cart, though, because the Mets seem to believe in this talent. So why not? Let's just hope he's not the next Jay Payton. That's all.
Yeah. Who knows? We may be even being swerved here. Maybe they're just pumping him up to trade him for an ace starting pitcher. So we don't know.
That's a great point. I generally like to call the offseason, the trade seasons in all these sports, it's lying season. And a lot of lies are being told out there through the media. We know this, Anthony. That's a fantastic point. He could just be hyped up to be included in a trade. And if so, David Stearns, salute. I see you. It's okay. So that's okay. But for now, I'm going to keep this in the cart. Okay. We got a couple more things. This is a stocked shopping cart. Anthony and I, we put a lot of things into the cart. We ran into the store, just grabbed a whole bunch of stuff off the shelf, and we got a couple more to go. Okay. Youth infielder plan. Now, we're talking about these players. We're talking about Brett Beatty, talking about Mark Vientos, we're talking about Luis Angel Acuna Jr., and we're talking about Ronnie Mauricio, right? That's a lot of young infielders here. The Mets have to sort this future core and figure out what they want to do with these guys. Are these guys part of the future or not? So are you keeping these guys in the cart as being part of the future core, or are you putting them back on the shelf in terms of they could be involved in trades or whatnot to move on? Do you like this future core of young infielders?
Can it be done individually?
Absolutely.
Can we keep? All right. So Brett Beatty, I'm keeping in the cart. I think we're going to see what we can get out of him for this season at third base. Mark Vientos and Ronnie Mauricio, I think, are contingent on what happens with Pete Alonso. And since I'm keeping Pete Alonso in the cart, I am removing Vientos and Mauricio from the cart and trying to possibly trade them and making them a part of a deal for some pitching or some, relievers. Luis Angel Acuna, if we can trade Jeff McNeil, I think Luis Angel Acuna is the perfect defensive replacement and backup. I'm not saying that Jeff McNeil was a great defensive player, but there had been some sparks during this season with Luis Angel Acuna getting to some big outs for this team defensively, and I wouldn't mind keeping him on the bench and being one of those players. And he can play the outfield. We've seen him play the outfield too. So keeping Beatty, keeping Acuna in the cart, probably selling on Vientos and Mauricio. And, you even got to throw in Jet Williams. Where does he factor in when it comes to this Mets? Because he's another guy on the rise that could be a part of his infield. And maybe he gets traded as well because we have Simeon now.
Yeah, it seems like a couple of these guys will be on the move. You and I have exactly the same players that I would keep in the cart and then move. I think Acuna Jr. is a fourth, fifth infielder on a good team. He's a good defensive player. He's a good utility guy. I think that's probably where he projects. The bat's not as strong. I'm intrigued to hear your reasons. Beatty, I think, has shown he can play defense. I've liked his resiliency. That has been impressive to me, and I still think there's another level for him to go with the bat. They've got to prove it again over a full season, but I do like that with him. As far as Vientos and Mauricio, the reasons I would let both of those guys go, Vientos just has been inconsistent. And unlike Alvarez, who went down last year and the Mets ran out of options and couldn't send Vientos down, obviously, Alvarez showed me fight coming back to where I felt really good about him. I don't feel the same about Mark Vientos going into 2026. Ronnie Mauricio, and I'm intrigued to hear about Vientos and Mauricio, Anthony. Ronnie Mauricio has fantastic bat speed, but bat speed is amazing. But the plate discipline, it's not. Now, I know somebody's going to be watching or listening to this and saying, Dex, he is tearing the cover off the ball in a Venezuelan Winter League. And I've seen that and I've read all that, but that's the Venezuelan Winter League. We got to see what he does at the major league level. I'm not sure he's got the discipline. I don't know if the Mets have time to wait on that particularly. So I'm out on that too. But why are you putting Mauricio and Vientos back on the shelf, Anthony?
I'll also say, Luis Angel Acuna, he's tearing it up in the Winter League as well, and we're not going to see that offense when he plays for the Mets. It's a totally different league, a totally different situation. For Mauricio, for me, where does he play? Where is he going to play? He's not going to start, right? If Alonso returns, that's another spot blocked, right? He's not going to play first base. Alonso, Simeon, Lindor are part of the infield. Is he going to take the job from Brett Beatty? And Brett Beatty right now has proven that he can play multiple positions, where he plays a good third base and he could play a good second base as well, and probably play the outfield. I think a thing about Mauricio to me as well, and I think we talked about this during the season, there were some times during games, especially when the Mets were struggling, where he kind of, I don't know if the term is zoned out or just wasn't 100% in the game, where he gets caught off of third base or he gets, caught in a run. Like he just didn't seem all in his time playing, even especially when they took time away from him. So I don't know where his head's at right now. And there's also just not enough space for Mauricio. Vientos, outside of being the DH, what do you do with him? I mean, that's again, we've kept Alonso in the cart. So us keeping Alonso in the cart means that we think that he's going to return. Outside of being the DH, there's nowhere to put Mark Vientos right now. He's not going to play third, right? He struggled there. You're not going to put him in the outfield. And, maybe he spells some time for Pete Alonso, but this is a guy that I think needs to play consistently to get on track and to get on a hitting streak and stuff like that. There's probably no room for Vientos either.
Yeah.
That's just me.
No. I agree. I think we're all saying with this, it becomes it's not even just like what you like in these players. At some point, we have all these young guys, and you're trying to win and be a win now team like the Mets are. This becomes a numbers game, and there just isn't enough roster spots, right? And so some of these young guys are gonna have to go. I think David Stearns recognizes this. Are there players? Could Vientos be attractive to a team looking for a DH? Particularly if Pete Alonso comes back? Sure. Is somebody who thinks they could tap into Mauricio's talent offensively? Yes. I think you made a great point about certain times during the season where he had lapses mentally, it seemed like. And also, if you really look at it, he didn't play a lot down the stretch, which I think told you about what Carlos Mendoza and the organization maybe thought about those lapses. He was on the roster, but he did not play a lot down the stretch in September. So I found that interesting. Yeah, I'm with you. Beatty and Acuna, I'm keeping them in the cart. Vientos and Mauricio, yeah, back on the shelf. Good luck with that. All right, couple more here. Let's talk about the young arms. And we're talking about Nolan McLean. We're talking about Brandon Sproat. We're talking about Jonah Tong. We talked a lot about them on this show. We have dove into the stats. My producer, Erica Block, was doing a lot of stuff. We talked a lot about those young arms and how we thought they should get a chance to pitch, and we got to see that down the stretch. But here's the thing. Are you keeping them in the cart so you can check out and have them as part of this rotation's future, or do you see them as trade chips and you're putting them back on the shelf so you can go elsewhere? Now, for this, we're going to do this just like the last one, individually, okay? There might be a pitcher you like and you want to keep in the cart. There might be a pitcher you want to put back on the shelf. What are you doing with developing these young arms? Who stays, who goes?
Yeah, Nolan McLean stays in the cart. I might have to fight someone if they try to grab him out of my cart. He's definitely
for Anthony on the holiday shop.
Yeah, he ain't touching. It's like the TV. He ain't touching Nolan McLean. We ain't moving him around. So we're keeping Nolan McLean here. Not promoting violence, but we're keeping Nolan McLean in the cart. It's obviously we can't move on from him for sure. He's going to be, probably will be our ace at some point in the next couple of years. Brandon Sproat and Jonah Tong, in the right move, I would trade them, and that's probably Tariq Skubal, and probably Tariq Skubal only. Outside of that, I would like to hold on to and develop these guys because, as we've seen, look at how expensive pitching costs right now. It's very expensive. Dylan Cease, who didn't have a great year, got $210 million. You want to develop as much starting pitching as possible and then get into free agency looking for position players that'll play every day. But if I'm to trade one of them, that one would go out of the three. It would probably be Brandon Sproat. I would like to hold on to Jonah Tong a little longer. But like I said, I'm only trading both of them for Tariq Skubal. That's the only answer and nothing else. Not even Freddie Peralta or Sandy Alcantara. That would be like one of those guys in those deals. But like I said, I'd like to hold on to them and develop them for the fact that if you develop homegrown pitching, trying to pay for these guys is going to be a whole lot easier than getting some of these pre-agent pitchers that are not even that good. So let's hold on to this group of pitchers right now.
Yeah, in short, I'm keeping all these guys on the shelf. However, I'm with you. If you can, excuse me, I've been on this train. If you can go get Tariq Skubal, you trade two of these three. You try to hold on to McLean. I know this is going to sound crazy. You might even think about trading McLean if you can get Tariq Skubal. He's that good that you might do that. But the rest, everybody, I'd love to keep him on the shelves. Now, I am not personally a prospect hugger. I think sometimes at some point you got to get something like an ace, you got to go out and do something. However, and this has been the Mets philosophy, and this has been David Stern's philosophy, he's willing to pay for elite level talent in terms of pitching in their prime. But the Mets have also talked about, which Anthony was just saying, which is they would like to be the Dodgers East. They want this sustainable success over a long period of time. Well, how do you do that? You need cheap young talent to hit. And when I say hit, I mean hit as hitting on your picks and your draft picks and your development. But you really need that also in terms of pitching because of how expensive pitching is, good pitching is. We're not even talking about elite ace pitching. We're just talking about good pitching. Good pitching costs a lot. Like Dylan Cease just got himself a bag, and he's not Tariq Skubal. Now, do I know if any of these three will be as good as Tariq Skubal? No idea. Don't even know if they'll even be as good as Dylan Cease. We don't know. I think Nolan McLean has a chance, but you got to see. And so for right now, I keep these three on the shelf with the caveat of if Tariq Skubal comes available and the Tigers come knocking and they want 2 out of the 3 or all 3, you got to do it. You just have to. So keep them on the shelf, but the right person comes and makes a good offer, yeah, they're coming off that shelf. It's not even that deep for me. Pretty easy here. All right, last thing, and I know some people, we looked in the store, you know, we spent big. We had some high-priced items we grabbed off the shelf, some high-priced items internally we put in the cart. But sometimes you got to go some bargain basement shopping. Sometimes you got to do that. Sometimes you got to go for the cheap buy. Sometimes you got to find a Clay Holmes and get something out of him, right? You want to find it. It's not the sexy names, not the names that everybody's, you know, dying to go about, but, you know, there's some names out here. You and I talked about this a little bit before. You know, you've got Kike Hernandez, you've got Josh Bell, Wilmer Flores is another name. These are names we're talking about that can provide depth, maybe fill some needs for the Mets, low-cost depth. What are you doing this? Are you in for the bargain basement group, or are you keeping them on the shelf?
I'm in for the bargain basement group. Obviously, it's that 5 below clearance aisle type moves here. And I don't even know if Kike Hernandez is probably going to get some good money here. But Stearns has talked about putting a winning product on this field, doing that with Marcus Semien, who is a winner, right? He's got a world championship. Why not bring in a guy like Kike Hernandez who can probably replace a Jeff McNeil when it comes to being that utility guy? And this is a guy that goes to the postseason, is a postseason performer on top of that, and he wins World Series. Why not bring another one of those type of guys in there? He's got a great personality. He'll fit right in. I think that Kike Hernandez is a guy that the Mets should consider for that bench and to be one of those utility type players.
I love Kike Hernandez as a choice for the Mets. I too am like you. Like, I almost feel like I'm being a little disrespectful to him and calling him a bargain basement guy. But he's not going to evoke the same emotion. And I think this is why we put him in this category, right? And when you talk about Kyle Schwarber.
He's not a big ticket item.
No, he's not a big ticket item, but I think he's a winner. He's a guy who can, you know, really help a team. And he's one. Look, I get it. He's not a spring chicken either. I'm not calling him old. He's in his mid-30s. He's 34 years old. But I think he's a guy that it wouldn't cost a lot for the Mets to get him. And he's a utility guy. But I think he could help fill a lot of needs for the Mets and really fit into what they need in that clubhouse. If you believe in chemistry and leadership, and I think chemistry is huge, in terms of sports, and it's hard to build, especially in a sport like baseball. You got to get some good clubhouse guys that know how to win to support the stars on this team, whether it's Francisco Lindor, whether it's Juan Soto, whether it's Pete Alonso if he's back. You need that kind of support on the team. So I think not just getting bargain basement guys, but the right bargain basement guys that maybe have fire. And that's why even I threw a guy who's played here before on the list, like a Wilmer Flores. It is a guy who could come in and you know, knows how to play the game. And if you need him in a pinch or somebody's injured or he needs to fill in for a couple of weeks, it's a guy you could trust. So for me, you got to keep this on the shelf because to win in sports, you got to win on the margins. you got to hit on the bargain basement guys. No disrespect to those guys. You got to hit on the guys that aren't the, superstar names or the sexy star names that don't evoke a lot of emotion. Because you got to hit on those guys. Because you know what? When those guys come through, that'll bring a lot of emotion. The Mets could have used a couple more of those guys this past year. So we'll see. So yeah, I'm keep the bargain basement guys in the cart. There's nothing wrong with shopping in the bargain basement aisle. You just don't want to get burned. Like I guess Frankie Montas was a bargain basement guy, and that didn't work out so well. So that's the way. You just don't want to get burned like that. But when you have Steve Cohen's pockets, what's $17 million a year? Again, it's not my money.
Yeah, and these guys are not going to be the main moves of this offseason because the Mets have a lot of them to do. But to add a Kike Hernandez, who's a utility guy, you're replacing a Jeff McNeil, and the lack of production there, you're putting in a guy like Kike, a winner, postseason player, a champion. You even talk about, guys like Wilmer Flores, who can possibly DH some days, can play first base. Josh Bell, same thing. Ref Snyder in the outfield. You mentioned Ponce as well, coming out of relief. That's something that David Stearns loves, right? Like he loves getting these kind of pitchers in relief and bringing them on. So I can see stuff like this happening. That's where David Stearns' wheelhouse is getting these kind of and like when we say bargain, there's something to that. But these are type of moves that, they help out the bench, help out the bullpen, stuff that the Mets need because you want to be able to spell a Francisco Lindor, Marcus Semien when they need a day, or a Pete Alonso when he needs a day. If there's an injury, you want these type of guys on the roster that can help this team out and even help with the young guys as well.
Yeah, and Cody Ponce was another player that I forgot to mention too. He pitched well in Korea last year, and so he's going to be looked at. And we've seen some guys, some pitchers, bounce back, coming back over from Korea. Can you hit on a guy like that? Look, there's some risk sometimes with the bargain basement guys. There's we just got to keep it a buck. There's a risk sometimes, but if you hit, it can be really good. And you make a great point. I can't just throw out Frankie Montas and not say that David Stearns hasn't hit with other guys because he did it with Clay Holmes. He did it with Sean Manaea the year before. So he did it with Luis Severino, Jose Iglesias, right? So we've seen him hit on that, and we saw a guy like a Jose Iglesias. Just his leadership and his energy, what that meant for the team. Is he the most talented player? No. But there was something to his leadership and his energy. And Kike Hernandez kind of is in that realm for me of a guy who can just play multiple positions, can play outfield, can play second, can play short. Like, he's a guy who could do a lot for your team and is very valuable and a proven postseason performer, which is probably the most valuable thing you can say with him. So, yeah, I like it. All right. We've gone through everything in the shopping cart. Everything we've gone through in the shopping cart. So now, Anthony, we got to make some decisions, man. We got to make some decisions. Like, you and I, there's a couple we were split on. I was taking notes on our list here. But I guess, let me put it like this. If there's three things that you got to keep out of what you want to keep in the shopping cart that you're going to take to the checkout, you can only take three. And I can only take three. What are the three that you are taking for sure to the checkout?
Oh boy, that is very, very tough.
You know what?
Definitely.
You know what? I'm gonna give you a little bit more because I feel like three. We went through 15 things. Three is a little like that. Makes you feel like you didn't go home with enough. Let's go with five. You get to keep 5 things you got. Five is a little more fair. Let's go with 5.
All right, now we're talking. Definitely Pete Alonso, Edwin Díaz. Those are the first two. Trading for an ace. We're at 3 now. Outfield upgrade. That is number 4. And then, I am going to go with a big bat at addition.
I knew you were going with that.
It's torn because I really wanted to say bullpen, but I feel like with the guys that we have already and Edwin Díaz, that David Stearns can figure out a way to bring in, like maybe they bring in a Ponce, something like that. I figured they can figure this out without having to make so many bulk moves. But the big bat addition, I think, would help out huge on top of bringing back Pete Alonso. So I'm going to go big bat addition. I'm going outfield upgrade, trade for an ace, and then re-signing both Pete Alonso and Edwin Díaz.
I like that. Okay. You checked out nicely. Okay. I'm going to go with re-sign Pete Alonso, re-sign Edwin Díaz. Think you got to do those. It'll have the fan base very happy. You got to get that done. Trade for an ace. This is very high for me. Got to trade for an ace. You have to upgrade this rotation somehow. I'm going to go outfield upgrade too. So our first four are exactly the same. You got to upgrade the outfield, especially now with Nimmo gone. You got to take this to the checkout. I'm very confident they're going to figure out a way to rebuild the bullpen. And it wouldn't shock me if they get another bat. So I'm going to go with my fifth one, which might be a surprise to people. But I think it's good. It's something that could invigorate, excite the fan base a little bit, especially if this comes to be true. My fifth one is going to be start Carson Bench in center field. Take that to the checkout. Believe in this kid, empower him, give him the tools to succeed. Get some young infusion of talent. When have you had this in a while as a Mets fan with a young kid coming in a position to play and see if he can do it? It's been a while. Let's go with that. I think it'll be exciting for the fan base. It's not sexy, it's not splashy, but let's do it. Start Carson Bench in center field. So 4 out of our 5 things were the same.
Yeah.
Went
Yeah.
a little.
Alonso was the last one to do that, to come out of spring training and be the one to invigorate that team in 2019. I know they missed the playoffs, but he was a huge part of the turnaround that happened that season. So maybe Carson Bench can provide that, and that would be very helpful if he can, because now that's one less position player and bat that they have to add in the offseason.
And I think that could be huge for them, because then if that happens, that then helps some of the other things that we're talking about, which is upgrading the bullpen, maybe putting the money, like you said, to get another bat that can help this lineup in another place. Maybe you can use that to go get a Kyle Schwarber. If that's part of the plan, I would feel really good. So you can see how Anthony and our choices can still connect together and be really good. Anthony, man, it was fun shopping with you. We didn't have to fight anybody. We didn't have to worry about anything. We made some good choices, I think. We'll see. It's going to be a very interesting offseason. I know you're excited. The winter meetings, they're coming up next week. Let me ask you this. How anxious are you / nervous for the Mets to get some things done soon through the winter meetings, so you don't have to wait around as we get closer to Hanukkah, Christmas holidays? How nervous are you about that? Look, they need to get something done soon.
I'm not as nervous as David Stearns should be. I feel like David Stearns needs to be more nervous than me, but I'll say this, and I think I predicted it this morning on the show, that we will get at least one big signing coming out of the winter meetings. I think I don't know what it is. I'm not going to say that I have sources or anything like that, but I think the Mets will get one big move done, whether it's resign Pete, resign Edwin, or get an outfielder or a big bat. I think that gets done at the winter meetings. All
right. I hope so. That would be really fun. Anthony will be on top of it. I will be on top of it. Please check Anthony out and his fantastic Mets podcast, the Subway To Shea Podcast, one of the best in the game. My guy Anthony Rivera talking on there, bringing you a lot of great Mets content. He's been doing that throughout the offseason. He will be joining me a lot more on Straight Outta Flushing here through the offseason. And always appreciate you, man. This was fun because we didn't get to do a Thanksgiving episode we had planned. So, we had to, with the shopping now and everybody spending now with the holidays here, it was good to do this and make our own shopping cart and talk about some decisions. And we hope the Mets fans out there enjoyed it. But I appreciate you coming on with me, man. Thank you so much.
Dexter, it's always fun. And now I have a new friend to go, Black Friday shopping and Cyber Monday shopping.
You're not getting me to do Black Friday shopping. I'm telling you that. That's not. Cyber Monday, maybe. Black Friday shopping, no. It's not happening. You're not getting, because, see, this is nice and calm, Anthony. We got to make decisions together. You can't do that in the store. You talked about, you got to worry about the threat of violence. People trying to snatch things. Nope. Dexter's not doing that. We're good. But thank you, man. This was so good. Once again, everybody, that is Anthony Rivera. I'm Dexter Henry. We'll catch you next time on Straight Outta Flushing.